article, Peter Benenson flags two articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in particular, Article 18, the right to freedom of thought, and Article 19, the right to freedom of opinion and expression. So, so this is Amnesty International's starting point. Political prisoners and this quite narrow slice of the overall Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So, but since then, Amnesty's grown in its scope, and you saw this in the video, right? And these are all, in different ways, things that we still work on. Disappearance is less so, but right, prisoners of conscience were sort of the original, the original topic that we worked on. But then it became clear that not everyone who was at risk when they were expressing their political views was actually getting to prison, right? Some regimes, like most famously in Latin America, were disappearing people before they got to prison. And what was happening to people when they were in prison? Well, torture, for one thing. Some prisoners were being put to death, and the Amnesty's agenda sort of organically grew as we worked on prisoners of conscience, and then broadened things out. Violence against women is something that we started working on in the 90s. And this was a bit of a jump in a few different ways. For one thing, the sort of paradigmatic bad actor that we'd been working on prior to this was the state, right? Was governments, and very often in the case of violence against women, the duty of the state is to protect against domestic violence, right? So it's not just the state as violator, right? It's the state as protector, which was sort of a paradigm shift for us. And then a big jump is what's come just in sort of the last decade, which is broadening out to our work on economic, social, and cultural rights. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But 2011. Amnesty International USA, these are our priorities. There are four of them. There are four campaigns, each of which has dedicated staff and a budget and support from across the organization and from Amnesty members. Individuals at Risk is our sort of bread and butter old school Amnesty campaign. That's the direct descendant of the prisoners of conscience work that we've always done. Working to abolish the death penalty, especially here in the United States, is something that we've been working on since the 70s and have seen some real successes in recently. Security with human rights is our campaign against torture, against indefinite detention, and other human rights violations in the context of the war on terror. And the Demand Dignity campaign is our economic, social, and cultural rights campaign, which again I work on.
Carol.
Oh yeah.
I understand that a lot of groups never define dignity. Does Amnesty International define it? Like, what does that necessarily entail? What does that mean?
Dignity as a concept. Sure. Sure. So the question is, how do we define dignity? It is. It is. We'll get. If you can hold that thought for just a couple of slides, there's an article from the UDHR that I'll put up on the screen that I think will give you kind of the key to how does dignity connect to economic, social, and cultural rights. So hold that thought if you don't mind. Any other questions at this point? Okay. So again. We have individuals at risk is sort of the old school bread and butter amnesty campaign, and our old school bread and butter amnesty activist event is something that happens every year It's called the Global Write-a-thon, and it actually starts this Saturday. And it's an international letter writing event. It's held every year around December 10th, the anniversary of the adoption of the UDHR. And we get hundreds of thousands of letters being written, tens of thousands of people actually writing those letters in the United States. This is a screenshot of just the events so far in this area, either kind of individuals who are pledging to write letters, or these green pins are public events, and including one here on the Berkeley campus. So you should seek it out and go write letters. And I'll be talking a little bit more about one case in particular in a minute. But the range of things that are featured in the Write-a-thon is also sort of a good snapshot of where Amnesty is at. So we look at issues like, or groups like student and youth activists, issues like freedom of expression, women's rights, LGBT rights, and then indefinite detention, issues of criminal justice, and finally the issue that I focus on, or one of the issues that I focus on, the right to housing. And these cases that are highlighted in yellow are the ones that are connected to the other priority campaigns, right? Security with human rights, the death penalty, and then the Demand Dignity campaign. So a few more kind of facts and figures about Amnesty in 2011. More than 3 million supporters in more than 150 countries. Our global headquarters, the International Secretariat, is in London. And there are sections or structures in 68 countries. So I work for Amnesty International USA, which is the affiliate here in the United States. And AIUSA it's the largest country section in terms of members and in terms of staff. May not be in terms of staff, but in terms of members. So there are nearly 250,000 members who are online members, or they're members of sort of in-person groups, whether they're in high schools or colleges or communities. And funding all comes from individual donors, either members of the 99% or the 1% who are generous, and foundations as well, but no government money, no corporate money, and that's to preserve our independence. Right. Interestingly, the country that has the most Amnesty members per capita, any guesses? It's a little random. No. Not that random. It's the Netherlands, interestingly. AI UK is also very big. AI Norway is small but mighty. So anyway, they have this incredible SMS text program that they're able to generate these. I mean, right, it's a relatively small country, but they're able to generate these rallies on 12 hours notice through this text system.
What's the text system again?
And just a kind of well-developed SMS text network that's able to. I mean, people are able to take action through. The question from Tom was, what is SMS? Anyway. Cool. Okay, so that's Amnesty in 2011, and you may have caught this in the video, but what are the techniques, right? What are the tools that we use? And Salil Shetty, our relatively new Secretary General, said it's only when you have millions of people coming together and the hard evidence that Amnesty brings to bear that's the key combination, right? So on the one hand, we have people, right? And so the tools are things like letters, petitions, emails, public events, public education, and the evidence comes in terms of documentation, whether it's formal reports or press releases or other sorts of official statements, and then lobbying, right? So sort of high-level staff lobbying and member leaders lobbying elected officials and other decision makers. And then we have some amplifiers that are very important to us. That means traditional media work, that means online work. And in general, I noticed that you have a whole kind of section of your syllabus called the growth of a human rights culture, right? And one way of summing up what Amnesty International in particular does is it helps to build a human rights culture. As compared to Human Rights Watch, which is sort of Amnesty's rival as the most prominent and most influential human rights organization, Human Rights Watch doesn't have a membership, right? That's the big thing that separates us from them. They're basically a think tank. They put out reports, they lobby people, but this stuff, the letters and petitions and emails, the public events, the public education, that's our job, right? And building a human rights culture, in our view, is the real key to ultimately ending human rights abuses. All right, I'm going to pause again. Any questions? Yeah, please.
You're just talking about Human Rights Watch being like rival groups. Do you ever collaborate with Human Rights Watch?
Sometimes.
What?
Sure.
So beyond our.
Yep.
Beyond the.
Yes. So the question is, I mentioned that Human Rights Watch is a rival, or in any case, another extremely prominent human rights organization, right? And do we ever collaborate with them? And if so, how? The answer is yes, sometimes. So, for example, a few years ago, we jointly released a report with Human Rights Watch on juvenile life without parole sentences in the United States. So that was jointly researched, and then the sort of publicity and lobbying that was done on the back of that report was also jointly done with Human Rights Watch. I mean, pretty regularly there will be statements and that sort of thing that both Amnesty and Human Rights Watch and other groups, whether human rights groups or other sorts of NGOs, will sign on to together. And we certainly talk to them, right? So, and kind of keep abreast of what each other is doing. Whether it has to do with security issues or environmental issues or whatever, we'll talk to them and kind of coordinate. And we try not to duplicate each other's work too much, right? So if there's a big report coming out on a particular issue, or if there's a lot of kind of high-level advocacy to be done on a relatively small issue, it doesn't really make sense for both Amnesty and Human Rights Watch to be doing that at the same time. And that's we try to coordinate that kind of thing. Does that help? Cool. Other questions? Okay. All right. Let's talk about the Demand Dignity campaign a little bit. And right, so here's the history slide, and I may fly through some of this more quickly than Tom or you would like, and if I'm doing that, please ask questions and I'll fill things in. But just a refresher on the sort of historical context for the big split between civil and political rights and economic, social, and cultural rights. It had everything to do with the